country, its own country now, company in Australia that really is changing and at the forefront of how we deliver road safety in all sorts of situations. I think Ken's superpower is kind of the opposite of Bridget's superpower, which is I think he's an expert at taking tiny little chunks of information and putting them all together into a system or a framework where we can understand them and make meaning from them. So my superpower is introducing people using the word chunks, apparently. So anyway, we have all these little chunks of information about raised priority crossings. I'm sure you'll come to us today with some as well. And he's going to teach us how to make sense of that. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Prue. And yeah, welcome everybody. I am going to jump into details of the engineering and design of raised crossings. And some of you are in this space, in the details space. Others maybe not so much, so you'll probably find some of this interesting. We may go into other areas, but as per usual, write your questions into the chat. Prue will be probably answering some in the background because she's got excellent technical engineering design knowledge herself in this space, but feeding them to me as we go. So my contact details are in there, so you'll be able to get slides, no doubt, and it's in there, a QR code to my LinkedIn, because I love to keep the conversation going and share information there. But if I don't cover things that you want covered and we don't have time, I'm happy to have chats with you afterwards. Okay, so what I'm going to try to cover off, and I've set up the slides accordingly. I'm going to try and do ramp grades and how we decide what grades of ramp we're going to use, lines and signs. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on lines and signs, but I'll do that. Roundabouts and positioning of raised crossings around roundabouts. Sight lines. Now, we'll spend a bit of time on sight lines because I think there's a lot of confusion out there in industry and how do we do this? How do we choose sight distance requirements? Lighting and drainage. So that's the plan, and anything else that you want covered. Okay, but just starting at a high level here, some design objectives, and this has been pretty well covered by Affairs Prue and Bridget, but locating our crossings on desire lines for pedestrians and cyclists, and thinking about convenient and traversable by all path users, having high alignment with safe system principles, so ensuring we're maximising that safety outcome, and considering them at a network level to ensure consistency along a corridor. So they're sort of high-level objectives, and I think they've been covered off pretty well. Design principles, well, I'm putting in there the severity of crashes first, and that's kind of been a safe system evolution for us to really say, what is the severity of the incident if it occurs, or I should say when it occurs, and then ensuring that we've done everything we can to stop that crash happening. So we're thinking about speeds of vehicles at the conflict point, and that is our mechanism for harm to the path user, okay, the speed that vehicle hits that user. Then we're thinking about sight distances, signs and lines, and the 7 C's that some of you know: conspicuous, clear, concise, comprehensible, credible, consistent, and compliant. Is that 7? Yeah, I think it is. Drainage, lighting, and then we've also got in there managing speeds for vehicles and sometimes pedestrians and cyclists on the approach to the crossing. So this one is at that particular conflict point. This is giving more time for all users to react, to slow down, to think. So that's what I'm going to try and cover in terms of design principles, and I'll go into some specifics. And I've got some questions for you and lots of case studies, and we'll jump into it. Okay, sight distance. Sight distance on the approach to crossings. A little bit of a thumbs up, thumbs down. So in the chat, just either say like it, yeah, good, bad, or thumbs up, thumbs down. Here we go. We've got a crossing. We've got 2 lanes in this direction. We've got 2 lanes on the other carriageway. We've got the crossing there. What are we saying? Pop some thumbs ups or thumbs down in there. What
Got
do
some
people
thumbs
say?
down here. People are not particularly happy with this.
Good. Okay. Well, Prue, give the prize to the first person who said thumbs down, because I'm with them on that. I don't like this. I don't like this for a number of reasons. Well, they're trying to at least provide a pedestrian facility, so that's good. So, but yeah, there's a few things that I don't like. First of all, we've got unabated speed of vehicles approaching this, and the second one, I suppose, is this issue, and it's called a dynamic visual obstruction issue. Anybody who's done the road safety audit course with me, we do delve quite a bit into dynamic visual obstruction, but it just means a sightline impediment that is not always there, a moving sightline impediment. So that's our sightline, and you can see that there's the possibility that a vehicle will be blocking sightlines to a pedestrian that's crossing. And what we see when we have these multi-lane approaches to pedestrian priority crossings is that often it's a larger vehicle here, maybe a truck or something like that. It slows down. We have vehicles behind it do an overtaking maneuver because of one reason or another, or it's just a vehicle in this lane. We have a pedestrian coming out, and that vehicle speeds through, and we have that incident. So that's one of the reasons. The speed, the fact that it's not got any speed calming, that one we were looking at, is another issue. So let's have a look at this one. This is also a multi-lane approach to a pedestrian crossing. How are we going on this one? Let's go some thumbs up, thumbs down on this one.
Ryan's got in there quickly. Good. Got Gemma, better, but not quite there. Better, got some smiles.
Yeah. Okay. I think sort of, yeah, it's for what we've got, it is pretty good. There's a few little bits and pieces that could be tweaked and improved. So let's give the first person who said good, and then somebody I think you said good, but not quite there. I think, yeah, there's little bits and pieces, but in general, I think what we're able to do here is achieve our sort of design objectives, even though it is a multi-lane approach to a crossing. I've got Wally stuck on thumbs down. There he is. It's back moving now. So the reason we've got this advantage is that sort of widening, the opening up of sight lines, and we've got the raised element to it. So we know if things happen, we're going to be slowing vehicles down. Don't worry about the bike rider. I just ridden out there with a friend. That's him just there, just waiting for me to take my photos and keep moving on. But why is this better? Well, I think you sort of understand it by now. But here we've got a truck in the right lane. You can see the sight lines are fairly well opened up to a pedestrian if they're coming off the median there. That if you're in this lane over here, you'd be able to see, react. You're also going much slower because you've had to navigate over the raised platform. If the truck was in that lane, if there wasn't that separator, we would have that sight line impediment. It's going to be better because it's slower, but still not quite as good. Okay, so you need some space to do it, obviously, but you can see there that the sight lines are better opened up to those pedestrians, and you've got that space. I just want to cover that one off quickly before I start talking more in depth about actual, more conventional sight distance to pedestrian crossings and raised pedestrian crossings. Thank you for the interaction. That's wonderful. I like there's a whole lot of emojis popping in. That's fun. Okay. A few sort of stock standard parameters that we use when we're thinking about sight distance to pedestrian crossing facilities. So A 1.6 meter setback is a fairly common distance you think of for the pedestrian approaching. Now, I'll come back to that actually. 1.2 meters a second is our sort of general stock standard speed we take for pedestrians approaching a crossing. And we take a 1.07, I don't know why they were so precise, but anyway, 1.07 eye height. And that's for somebody in a wheelchair. It also works well for kids and the like. So there are a few parameters that we tend to use, and I'll be using those as we tick along. Now, there's this really interesting sort of way some people approach thinking about sight lines to pedestrian crossings. And it's really based off the road rules, the Australian road rules, which then filter into the state road rules, or that basically these are non-binding, but they're the template and then you use. Anyway, the point being, in there it says a driver must not stop on a pedestrian crossing, blah, 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 or on the road within 20 meters before crossing and 10 meters after. So a lot of people just say, well, 20 meters, and that gives our sight line. Now, if you're in New Zealand, what 6 meters is what's in the road code. So we've got some differences there. But then there's this bit afterwards, which is really important, unless the driver stops at a place or length of road or an area to which a parking control sign applies. Okay, so we're not stuck on that. And it is our responsibility to check whether that is an appropriate sort of distance. Plus, we've got other things that can impede sight lines, not just parking, although parking is a very common one when we think about crossing points, isn't it? So just taking that 20 is not appropriate as designers. So what do we actually do to work out this sight distance? Okay, well, you use essentially safe intersection sight distance formula or SSD formula, same formula. And what we're doing there, so let's take this normal zebra crossing, so at grade pedestrian crossing. So we set a 1.6 meter setback, and we want to clear that of any sightline impediments, okay? And what we'll do is we'll take the 85th percentile speed of vehicles approaching, and we'll put in there a reaction time, and I would use the lowest reaction time because we're in a urban environment. People are going to be very alert. You use your sort of 2.5s in, these rural freeways and those sort of things, but you can be down at 1.5. I think I'm fairly comfortable with that. Coefficient of deceleration, I'll use the 3.6, which is a little bit more, I suppose, conservative, thinking about wet roads and the like. And you use this formula and you simply plug this information in. So you've got reaction time there, operating speed, coefficient of friction or deceleration. And then if you've got any grades to play with there. And you plug it all through and it comes out at 48.17. So you can see a significant sort of distance that we're thinking about there. So on some of these higher speed approaches to non-race crossings, we're thinking about we might need a bit more distance there to give the driver an opportunity to see the pedestrians crossing, react, slow down, and stop. Now, when we raise the crossing, this becomes an interesting alteration to our sight distance calculations. This is another one where interesting practice out there in industry and quite varied. A lot of people will just take the free flow 85th percentile speed, essentially run their same calculation. Now, that can give us some pretty significant sight distances that we're trying to cater for. And in my experience, I'm seeing, I suppose, a lot of crossings that should have gone in that didn't because for one reason or another they weren't comfortable with sight lines or that parking maybe have to be removed or the like. And they're basing it all off this sort of thinking. But the reality is when a vehicle is approaching this, they are going to slow down. So the 85th percentile free flow speed is probably not appropriate. So do we then go to sort of this other one, which would be the ramp speed, the speed at which people will be navigating the ramp? So that being like say 25 is what we expect they'll navigate over the ramp. Might be at 20, but we've give a little bit of extra there. And if you sort of run the calculations on that, we're down at 17. Okay, and so this is starting to be a lot less and gives us a lot more opportunity. Now, some people will argue that you can go even further and say, well, hang on, this is a point where a driver will have to give way if they need to. So we shouldn't treat it as anything but a give way sign at a normal intersection, which then we would be looking for safe gap sight distance. But the practice of drivers is not to approach these as an absolute, like they're approaching a road intersection where they don't have priority. They sort of work in this hybrid speed hump style arrangement. So it's not appropriate to go right up and look for safe gap sight distance, which would come significantly down on this. But what you can kind of think about is this, and I've put together this sort of graph to try to demonstrate this, where a driver is coming along and say, I'm just using some simple figures here, coming down along here at 50 kilometers per hour. Okay, approach sight distance being, okay, I've seen there's a crossing coming up. Okay, I can see that I might have to give way. And they start, well, I might have to give way, but I'm going to have to navigate over something that is raised, vertical deflection in the road. So they start their deceleration. And there'll be a little bit there, and then they'll start to decelerate. And then they get to this point. And that is the point really where they make their decision. Is somebody there? And do I keep braking? Or do I continue on at this speed, navigate over the ramp and continue on? So you can see there's significant differences in sort of sightline triangles. And I really do encourage you to not throw out the idea of a pedestrian priority crossing with sightlines that are big. Let's do some lower sightline calculations. I'll pause there. Is anybody asking any questions at this stage, or do I just keep sort of powering on?
I haven't got any no questions from the users, but I've got a question.
Yes.
So I think I've seen some research that suggests that in 50% of pedestrian crashes, the driver failed to brake. So what do you think about the fact that these drivers are slowing down? Is that likely to mean we've got feet closer to brakes? And is that another advantage of this?
Absolutely. And you would absolutely be within your right if you were starting to prepare design exception reports and the like to say reaction time at 1.5 is excessive. They are there, they are there. They are braking, and it's just an instantaneous effort to create more braking. So you're spot on. Like they're ready to go. They're ready to stop.
We've got another question about a cyclist will be approaching at more than 1.2 meters a second. I think we're going to go into that in a few minutes. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I'm just talking about pedestrians here, and we'll get on to cyclists because that's a whole other ball game. But great question. So Austria's Guide Road Design it talks about a 2.5 meters a second deceleration rate, which I'll come back to. But that's sort of our car deceleration rate, which is helpful. But I'll give a little another prize out. I hope you're keeping track of the prizes. We'll post them out to you. Don't worry. What else can we do here to improve sightlines? Any ideas? Any ideas? So we've got this pedestrian crossing. If we were worried about sightlines, what else could we possibly do?
Couple more people. Okay, we've got high friction surfacing, lighting, advisory signs, zigzags, reduced crossing distance, outstands or build outs, speed hump on approach, clear vegetation. Yeah. We're going to keep going.
This is awesome. Good group. Well played. Okay, first, I think Laura and Lewis, so talking about reducing crossing distance or build outs, outstands, whatever you want to call them, depends on which jurisdiction you're in, is the one I was sort of talking about. But I think everything people are coming up with there are good. And there are ways of thinking, let's activate the driver to ensure that they are aware that they're going to have to slow down and stop, ensuring that we can see everybody. But the one, that I was just mentioning there was sort of those build outs, because you open up more sightlines, obviously, and you're thinking that 1.6 meter setback, you've got better sightlines there from a distance. And you can, think of that as one other further option to improve things. Okay. So, yeah, I won't talk more about some of those other good ideas people had. Some of them aren't really about improving sight distance. They're more improving alertness of drivers to the fact that they're going to have to stop, which is really important and good. And I'll talk a bit more about some of those signage and line marking things that we can do. So crossing sight distance is this idea that a pedestrian that's standing on the roadside wanting to cross a road where they don't have priority, right? That they need to be able to see the vehicles approaching and find that, gap. So this pedestrian crossing should be able to see that vehicle, judge, okay, do I have enough gap here to cross the road? And it's going to depend on the distance to cross and all those sorts of things. So if you work out crossing sight distance at this location here, and I think I've used 40 as the speed on the approach here, we're talking about 65 meters. Now, so that's 65 meters clear of any sightline impediment. So we've got a sightline impediment here. We've got a tree blocking the sight line. So we're not meeting our crossing sight distance requirement for this pedestrian. They won't have enough time to make that judgment. Now, this is where our 1.2 meters a second for speed that the pedestrian is walking, because we've got to factor that in to how fast can they dart across the road, essentially. If we put a pedestrian crossing, a raised pedestrian crossing, depending on exactly how we do those calculations, we can be down at sort of 17, at the most conservative end 34, but we're all still, very much sort of lower in terms of the sight distance requirements there. So that's one significant advantage. But the other really big advantage we have is that a vehicle approaching the crossing really just needs to see the fact that there is a crossing there and it's raised to start their slowing down journey, if that makes sense. And that's where we go from, driver eye height to you go to the pavement markings and you work out your approach sight distance. Okay, so what we're doing there is saying, well, that driver can see that there is a raised pedestrian crossing there, a raised feature for them to navigate. They can see that quite far back. And they will start their slowing down journey there. And this becomes really interesting and important, I think, because we've got a lot of situations out there on the road network where we are not providing crossing sight distance at locations we know pedestrians are crossing, right? Then you try and do then if we were to prioritize that for pedestrians, provide that raised crossing, we meet approach sight distance, right? That's meeting our standards requirements, by the way. That's the real thing that's documented. You got to get approach sight distance. They don't really talk about sight distance to the pedestrians. So so we've had a huge win there. We've given pedestrian priority, and we're meeting sort of safer setups there. Now, Prue, I'll see if there's any questions. Then I want to ask the group a question.
So we've got what about for larger vehicles where drivers are higher up? Talking about approach sight distance. I imagine that's usually easier.
It's usually easier. And you'd probably want to take into account the percentage of heavy vehicles you've got using the road. And if that is sort of that above 20% heavy vehicles, you're starting to go into a realm where that's your real design, your major design issue. Most cases, Prue, you're right, it's a better sightline thing, but there are occasions going under underpasses, tree canopies and the like, where it can be a little bit of a go back the other way. But we just use for normal roads, and most pedestrian crossings are going to be on roads where you're using driver eye height, the standard driver eye height there.
Quick question from me too. On a crest, would the raised platform make approach sight distance easier to see? Something weird. Easier to achieve.
Easier to achieve, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's setting up there for you to see. You still do it to the pavement, but yeah.
Okay.
So the question, well, approach sight distance, we've done, calculations are in there, 34 meters. What if you were concerned and you couldn't quite meet that approach sight distance, or you really did want to also ensure that you've got more sight distance for the vehicle to the pedestrian? Any ideas on what we could do? So we had some good ideas on how to further alert this driver before to the fact that there's a crossing there and they could have to give way with zigzag lines and flashing lights and the like. Any other ideas on how we might improve this scenario a little bit if we wanted to?
The tree's gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Craig cut down the tree, and Brian has crown lift the tree. So I think that's up the story clearing, and it's a bit bigger, so Craig's decided to cut it down.
No convex mirrors.
Mirrors.
Yep. So that's right. Clearing out the sight lines would certainly help things.
Hugo's installed the crossing closer to the apex.
Yeah. Okay. So moving the crossing would be one. Maybe off pedestrian design lines. We don't want to sort of do that too much, or we know they just don't get used.
We've narrowed the road at the crossing. We've got that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep. So we've got, and these are all good. I mean, yes, certainly. Again, we could have a curb out stand as we did before. Somebody's doing a pedestrian overpass. Wow,
we got options. It's good to know we've got options.
Yeah. We do also have the option to just slow vehicles down back here, or slow vehicles, at these points with different raised treatments. I don't want people to forget that. And I've got some examples coming up later, that our objective is to slow vehicles at the crossing point and that conflict point, which is great and important. But slowing the vehicles so they've got enough time to see things is also something we should keep in our back pocket as a consideration. But I think I like the ideas that are coming in.
Interesting. We've had a question here, Ken. Interrupting Ken. In New Zealand, it's a legal requirement to provide safe stopping distance at a zebra crossing. Does Australia have similar requirements?
No, it's pretty. It's pretty murky when you get into the Australian standard and Austroads nobody, they're like, we could argue to have essentially, as long as you've got approach sight distance, pretty much get away with whatever you want. Practically, from a safety perspective, you want to be providing those safe intersection sight or safe stopping sight distance, but taking into account the fact that people will be slowing on the approach to these and the speeds will be down. So you don't need to be extreme about it.
Yeah.
So this scenario, I mean, here's another example of where we get significant advantages of these. You know, a driver will not necessarily have the sight lines to 1.6 metre back pedestrian at these sort of situations. They will have the sight line, they will likely have the sight lines for the approach sight distance. So we've got a good situation there. If you put raised crossings around a lot of it, you're slowing vehicles down even more. You might achieve both, but you can get really nice scenarios where we're meeting a whole lot of these sightline requirements. All right. Here's Wombat, and he's doing thumbs up and thumbs down again. What do we think on this one? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Agree. Yep. Thumbs down.
Yeah.
Not happy.
Not happy, but the bus isn't there the whole time, is it? Maybe that's the justification. We can be, yeah. But so there was a bit of discussion about placement earlier in the course around, buses and ensuring desire lines and people getting off buses and making that their crossing point. We do want these crossings around the bus stop location, but we do think about that dynamic visual obstruction being the fact that, okay, we may not have parking there or we may not have a permanent fixture there, but think about those sightlines as well. Second to this, of course, is the fact that it's not raised, so vehicles coming along there will be going at speed potentially, and we've got that nasty situation. So yes, agree with the thumbs down. Mm-hmm. Well done, everybody. Let's have a look at this one. Okay, looks like everything. Well, I won't lead the witnesses. I'll let people. Now, don't worry about the little signs over the lights. We just haven't quite been switched on.
Looking pretty happy with this one.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, I was out with a colleague doing road safety audit post-opening road safety audit of this one. I'm very impressed. Well, really quite nice. Great ramp sliding. They've got the no stopping there. So we keep those sight lines open. The curb outstand build outs. So that 1.6 metre setback. It's all really what we're looking for. It's quite nice.
There's a comment about sign clutter. Sorry. Comment about sign clutter. I think we'll go into that later, won't we? Into some options for condensing the signs.
Yeah. We'll have a chat about it. I've got some answers, but they're not proved answers yet. But we'll keep working on that. Interestingly, nighttime inspection of this, and yeah, it is next to a school, and just watching the different things that happen. Do see that people are taking advantage of that space. Now, I come back here and it's an illegal maneuver to be parking your ute or whatever that was in this space. Just the importance again, I think, for any of you road safety auditors out there to ensure that you're out there during different times and especially times of major activity. But it seemed to be a really common one to just prop there, pause, and wait for the netball player or the kid or whatever. So that one, some features we could possibly look at with that are, well, there's different physical treatments you could utilize in this. It becomes a little annoying to try to get in and out of this car park, but it can certainly be done with that. You can do longer extended curb build outs and the like. So there's a few options there, but just something to consider. Oh, another one. Okay, what about this one? No, it's very, this one's a bit hard. Bro, I don't think I'll do that. But I won't do the thumbs up and thumbs down because you don't have the context. You can't really see too much of it. It's pretty nice. I like it. It's on the petrol roundabout. Again, we may have trouble with people utilising this. We do have the curb outstands, which are nice. The one thing though that I'm kind of interested in, and I better delete my markings there. What height of vegetation can we have in these areas? Now this one looks pretty good, nice low ground cover, and I'm sure they'll be well maintained to be low. But in situations out there when we're building these crossings, it's just prime landscape opportunity, isn't it? Because it's sitting there just ready to go. So what are people saying there for the sort of heights people like? I see a variety coming in.
Yeah, we've got great answers here. I'm impressed. We've got less than 1 meters. We've got maximum 600. There's a few people who have said 600, 500. I've got to learn my acronyms here. Yeah, so between 500 and a meter we've got.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, 500. Yeah. 500, 600 is good. So some people will argue. Remember back I had the picture of the crossing with the heights and the speeds, and we had the guy in the wheelchair at 1.07. So some people will argue that that's the eye height. So you should have the pedestrian being able to see, and then you've got that. But what the mistake is there is that a driver approaching, well, they're just going to see the top of a kid's head or top of a person in a wheelchair's head. So that's insufficient, really, for us. In that scenario. Okay, the pedestrian may be able to see, but we want to ensure that comes out through the other way. So the 500 well. Prue, what was your rule of thumb that I went, I like this one. What was it?
For the height, is this the height?
The height, the envelope you want. It was 500 to...
what 500 to 1.5. Yep.
And that's about the best I reckon I've heard. 5 to 1.5 clear, so that we've got this envelope here. And
that a wombat height is I've worked
out a wombat height if you got a little wombat here. That's good, and you can certainly find ground cover that can do some nice landscaping and the like with it. So 500 to 1.5. Nice little trip down here to Warrnambool, beautiful part of the world, and I really like this one, and this is. I wouldn't call this a major safety issue, but it's something we do look out for, which is angle parking near crossings is commonplace, and the vehicles backing over the crossing. So as I said, not a major safety issue. It's annoying and the like, but certainly ensuring that, or trying to ensure that vehicles have the space to back out and not go onto the crossing. And I like this nice use of this spot as the disabled parking, because you've got your buffer area there, which gives that nice bit for people to back out and not back up onto the crossing. Okay, so somebody asked a really good question, didn't they? Well, they said, well, hang on, 1.2 meters a second, that's not really going to be what a cyclist is going to be doing, are they? And that's absolutely right. So we've got to think about, well, what speed would a cyclist be coming in? And I should have also said, you always need to be context sensitive. So if, for example, you had a path out of a park that came directly straight to a wombat crossing or raised pedestrian crossing with nothing else there, you probably wouldn't use the 1.2, would you? Because you'd be thinking people are jogging, people are moving along quite fast. If you've got the footpath running parallel to the road, and then they're crossing. Well, the 1.6 is definitely appropriate. So you've got to always be thinking about the context. So let's think then about, well, okay, we've got now bike riders coming through. Now we use an eye height there of 1.4, which actually doesn't come into play much, but what are we using as the travel speed? Well, there's lots of different research and things out there, and I'm going to use a couple of them. So one, there's some research giving you some different uphills, downhills, all sorts of things, which you may use, again, depending on the context and what you want to be doing. TMR runs in with this 4.1 to 6.9 meters a second, or sort of 15 to 25 kilometer per hour, which, you know, that seems reasonable. I'll show you later. Victorian Department of Transport has some sort of 20 for shared paths, 30 kilometers per hour for dedicated cycle ways, which I'll use for some calculations. But these are the ranges that you're in. Okay, and so these are where we're going to provide cyclists with priority crossing, and Prue talked to you a bit about that, and you know, this is where we use this sort of sign. Essentially, we're making this, you know, a road, aren't we? And whoa, and we're making this a road, and you know, we're signing it like an intersection, aren't we? Okay, so let's delve into that a bit and try and understand how we're going to calculate sight lines. Now, if you are maybe not doing those shared path crossings and you're having what we're starting to see a bit more of now, which is the bicycle crossing with the raised pedestrian crossing, you know, around roundabouts. So that's the Moray Street roundabout there. This one's out in Melton. You know, you would be thinking about the faster of your crossing users there. So thinking about how cyclists would be seen on the approach to that. They're your real parameter in terms of your design considerations. Okay, here's a video approaching a shared path crossing, and you can see there, I'll play it again because, yeah, you can see there the sight lines. You can see that car comes along, and there's a point there where, okay, the car can see me. This is me riding, and I could see the car. And I looked at the car and I said, all right, are they going to stop? I went, yep, they're slowing down. I was confident. I'm sure they saw me. They went, oh, okay, I better not go. Doing a bit of moving around there with my 360-degree footage. I can provide lots of 360-degree footage for people of riding through lots of these crossings if you're interested. So, you know, that's the idea. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to ensure that the driver approaching can see an approaching cyclist. The cyclist can see the vehicle. Now that second one's an interesting one. In theory, you might go, well, do we need to provide that? But again, sort of like that safe intersection sight distance, you want to be able to react and to stop. So the document I point to, which probably has delved into this in this specific scenario in quite a bit more detail than a lot of other documents, is this technical guide from the Victorian Department of Transport, Design Principles for Raised Priority Crossings. Now, Prue's also done a lot of thinking in this space, and we had long conversations, and we'll maybe get her input on a few things in a minute. But I'm going to take you through how to calculate these sight lines using the method that they put down in this document, which I think is reasonable. I think it is a little conservative still, but I think it's a reasonable starting point. And okay, so what you need to do is understand, well, it's based off safe intersection sight distance theory again, okay? And it's using travel time for cyclists and motorists crossing. And what we want to do is we want to pick one of these, what we call travel times. And I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to Oh, sorry, I'm just. Anyway, sorry about that. Keep going. Okay, so what we're thinking about here, and I think you've got this clear in your head after my video, but let's play it again. So we've got vehicles approaching, and okay, they have not had time to see each other, to react, and we've had a crash. So we want to ensure that we have some sight lines, and it's going to be a distance A and some distance C. I'm going to call it A and C. I'll give you a B later, don't worry. So in this scenario, we've got vehicle approaching, they've seen, and the cyclist goes through. That's what we want. Or the other scenario is vehicle approaching and they don't give way, but the cyclist has time to react, slow down, and that's the second option. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, you've got a number of scenarios. I'll give you 3 scenarios. One is where we see a shared path running parallel with a road. This is quite a common situation because you'll often like to run your shared path along a road, don't you? It's a great spot. You've got road reserve and all sorts of things to play with. So what we're doing here is ensuring that this vehicle down here can see that rider approaching, can see the conflict point, can see a rider approaching from the other direction. And you've got at the turning point, you want to ensure that driver can see there, that driver can see, and you get the picture. And what we get is the sort of sight distance envelope we're talking about in this scenario. So we then want to be talking about, well, okay, we've got A still, that's how far back the cyclist is. And then we've got some sort of B distance, don't we? And it's B to that point that they're turning. Okay, it's not B all the way into there, it's just B back to the point that they're turning, because we're assuming that they turn at a low speed, which we know people turn at low speed, and we think about a 20 kilometre per hour turn. Okay, so how do we work these out? So we're trying to find out, well, what would A be, what would B be, and what would C be? C being a straight approach, which is actually, that distance. That distance is C as well. Oh, there, I've got it there. Let's see in our scenario 2. And scenario 3, maybe you've got that path coming up. All right, I'm going to run through how to calculate this, and then we might take a stretch coffee break. Well, we'll see how we're going. So the first thing you need to do is use those travel times. Now, that's the idea that a vehicle or a cyclist has this travel time, observation time, reaction time. And we do this utilizing understanding of what is that speed environment that we're in. So we use the 5-second travel time there for these high-speed road environments. So maybe you've got a big arterial that's running along and you've put a shared path next to it or a cycleway next to it. Well, we're talking about that 5-second reaction time. Okay. And you go down a 4-second, 3-second, and down to a 2-second. Should be used in scenarios highly constrained, and these lower speed environments. So you're going to select one of those. So step 1, select a travel time based on what your environment is. Then you go and you use this table, which is all based off the safe intersection sight distance calculation. This is in the guide, and I've put the guide into the learning management system, or the note in. And you say, okay, whatever you've selected, 2 seconds. And then you say, well, what's the speed of the cyclists? Okay, so is it that 30? Is this going to be a cycleway and they're moving along fast through there? Is it a shared path scenario? Or have I even decided, well, it's a shared path scenario, but they may have slowed down on the approach to this area, or they've slowed down, or for some reason I think they're going slower. And then you're able to, select whichever cyclist speed you want, and then you're able to find that distance for A. Okay, so this one, maybe I've decided to go with a 25 because I think they're going a bit fast, and we've got 14 and a 2 second. Hopefully that makes sense. That's getting our cyclist distance setback. Then we want to work out this B and this C, and that's where we do have these other tables. And again, they're just tables you can read the values off. And you can see here operating speed on the main road. You're still using that travel time you've selected, which is also sort of based off that operating speed of the main road and speed environment. But you pick whatever that one is, and again, find the corresponding. So I think we had a 2 second there, and if the approach speed there is maybe 40, we can pick there. The B should be 22, or C, and you'll have similar requirements. So there are some assumptions in this. We've got 2.5 meters a second deceleration and flat terrain and the like for the bike paths and the road. So that gives us then what we're looking for in terms of these A and C and B. And so you've essentially you say, okay, I've decided on a travel time of 3 seconds, 3 seconds for them, 3 seconds for them. And then I've decided on the speed that the cyclist is going to be coming in at, and that gives me A there. And then I've decided, the speed of the vehicle, and that gives me C there. And so that's our site triangle. Okay, so in some situations, it's not going to be possible for us to get that. Okay, and it's interesting having lots and lots of discussions with the Department of Transport in Victoria about that design note. And I was pointing out some of the slight conservatism in it and saying, so the last thing I'd want is people not putting in raised priority crossings because they can't quite get some of this, because I think it's overly conservative. And they said, yeah, we agree with that. And since the release of that, we've been involved in many, many projects, and we have never stopped a priority crossing going in based on what's in these guidelines. It's just about understanding that, and then understanding ways that we can, encourage safe and appropriate crossing points. And so you can, if you're not meeting this, start to look at, well, what speed management can we put in for the cars? Okay, so you can significantly reduce that by slowing the vehicles on the approach to these points. You can then think about cyclist speed. Can we slow the cyclists down on the approach to this point? And we can do that with horizontal or vertical deflection. So you can have your path chicane, and it's kind of nice to do that for another reason, because you get that extra little bit of space for a vehicle to prop if your road's down there. You get that chicane, you're slowing them down a bit to the crossing point. So that's one. You can do speed humps for cyclists. Now, it's just the same way, slowing them down, and I can, show you some examples of that. I don't like to do that, but if need be, if I'm really struggling there, that's an option. You may consider a lower travel time. Remember, that was our ability to select that travel time. And then I suppose at the end, you're starting to say, is this appropriate? If you're not being able to do all of this, maybe it's signalized crossing time or something different. Okay. Here's an example. And I think this one is interesting. I mean, it was partly due to not meeting some of those requirements. It was also due to some pretty tricky drainage scenarios and the like. But, raised Caution, slow vehicles on the approach. Slow them down, back further, give them more time to see, to react. So that's a nice little one there. Another one which has been used as well is, the utilization of stop requirement. I'm pretty skeptical on how effective this is, but it's out there as one that could be used. I mean, regulatory signage style stuff is sort of a last resort, really, isn't it, in terms of road safety? And we know it's not going to be as effective, but there's an option there. Wow. Okay, I see lots of good discussion going on there, Prue. I think you're going to get, what is that, RSI from all those. Good.
Thank God for typing. There was a question here that spun me out a bit. I got a bit distracted from Bill, which is distance B is challenging. So this is the driver approaching from the major road and kind of turning left. The driver has to look past or through cars A, pillar, passenger headrest and things. I guess as they get closer, that is interesting. It just started making me thinking about some of the cycle tracks videos that are out that shows how the reaction for the bike rider and the driver kind of work together here, and how it opens up time for each of the different users to see each other. So I think the way that you've explained it in terms of thinking about the sight distances from both users it is good. But yeah, that's I'll try and track down a video to share as well during the break. But
yeah, no, I mean it is a really good point. It's a pillar's an annoyance, isn't it? In a vehicle, it sits right in that spot, which can mask cyclists, motorcyclists, and the like, especially in that, and then you would dynamically move with them. So that's an annoyance. I think your point there is spot on, Prue. We're trying to provide these facilities so that rider should be able to see as well. It is kind of what we've got in terms of best thinking at the moment, but always happy to continue to discuss it. Okay, what do you reckon? Take a short break now?
Yeah, you've nailed it in terms of first hour. It's 2 minutes to the hour. So I don't know, what do you want? Come back at 5 past?
Let's go to 3 minutes past, please, because I've got like 6 hours of content to get through.
Okay. We will see you in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
I found a video in my 5 minutes.
Good job. Okay, so there's a video from Prue in there, which you can watch at some point from about 1:20. It looks like.
It's only 2.5 minutes all up, but if you're impatient, we'll go straight to it.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep ticking on and pick up here at roundabouts and positioning. Okay, let's have a look. So there's kind of two options that you have when you're doing raised crossings or crossings of any description, really, at roundabouts. One is to go right up at the hold line, as you see option 1 there. And option 2 is to provide that setback 5 to 8 metres is generally across Australia and New Zealand what a lot of guidance is saying. And it's basically enough for a car to prop there out of the way. So obviously, like option 1 has got some, like the circulating carriageway is blocked. if a pedestrian is crossing. So that blue car there is going to be, blocking the ability for the white car to turn, and so we've got those sort of traffic congestion challenges. Now, a lot of situations, if you've got lots of pedestrians, it's an active area. I mean, really, prioritizing the fast movement of vehicles through there is not going to be the case. So you shouldn't worry too much about that. So it's certainly a viable option, and I wouldn't discount that at all. And it's nicely on pedestrian design lines a lot of the time, so that can be beneficial. The idea of a setback, you get at least one vehicle out of the way there, so you're, freeing up your circulating carriageway. The one, though, that I want you to think about also is vehicles coming out. This is where option one is a little bit less desirable, because as a vehicle approaches, it will tend to prop on the crossing. And that just means that our pedestrians will have to sort of walk around the back of it. And that's not going to be good for people on mobility devices and things and out the way. I mean, it's not the end of the world, and everything's very slow and the like. But the ability for a vehicle to prop here and then one be waiting back here is I suppose, a better scenario. And so I do put that in the preferred category, and it's nothing really to do with trying to prioritize car movement at all. It's more just that queuing over the crossing challenge. And so there you can see, the raised crossings with that area to prop there, either going in or coming out, and it all sort of sits there quite nicely. There you can see the other one where we've got vehicles giving way to pedestrians and sort of blocking up the circulating carriageway, which is fine. But you can imagine, you sort of come in and maybe you prop there, and then it just is a little bit more awkward. Another important characteristic of us to think about is that perpendicular approach to anything raised. I mean, it's a very good principle all over the network. If you're going to raise something, make it perpendicular to travel for the vehicles. It's going to be good for heavy vehicles, and it's going to be good for motorcyclists, and it's sort of a more stable one. So here's an example, and we've got a design of a raised crossing point. It's actually raised signalized crossing, which I do like raised signalized crossings as well. I like anything raised, but it's right at that point where it's on a curve. So I'll give another prize out for any ideas we've got on how we could improve this situation from the fact that we're not meeting that ideal perpendicular point that we've seen that raised bit. Any ideas?
Haven't got anything in there yet.
Oh, okay.
Ideas to make this perpendicular?
It's all right. Oh, here they come.
Here we go. Lewis is off. Angle the raised platform. Adjust the line marking. I like it.
Yeah. Break the crossing into two stages. Platform. All good. All right. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could look to do a variety of things in these cases. So one would be to splay that crossing, angle the crossing, so square it up a bit more. You can see the crossing is still, a consistent width, but the actual raised platform is splayed out. So and that's, I think, what Drew said. They're making that wedge shape. So you can give a few prizes out through. I'll let you work out who. But lots of good ideas in there. So that's one. I also like the idea there that somebody came up with is, well, we've got, a bit of median area, so we can sort of elongate these, we can move things around. You don't want to have varied differences if you don't have a separator, but something that you could certainly consider is that sort of setup. Now, there's lots and lots of stuff to think about with pedestrians and roundabouts and different treatments and features and the like. And certainly in my module here, I don't have time to really delve into that. But there are quite a number of resource documents. I think Queensland's got a number of more recently released things, and I'll put those into your into the learning management system. I'll show you at the end. There's a whole folder of good stuff. There's the Victorian one. Guidance on bicycle pedestrian treatments at roundabouts. Doesn't go into as much design detail, but it's something to consider. Okay, so another little point, and we were sort of talking about it there at roundabouts, is that distance between the road here and the, I suppose, hold point or the crossing point. And it can be really beneficial if we can get that that setback so a vehicle can pop there. So if you have a right turning vehicle, in these situations, that can come in, and you've got enough space for that vehicle to not be in live traffic, that can be a really beneficial thing. I won't talk more about that because I want to talk about ramp grades, and platform lengths, and all these bits and pieces. Here we go. Okay, so the principle here is fairly straightforward, and I'm sure all of you sort of get the idea. But the sharper the grade of the ramp, the more vehicles are going to slow down on the approach to that. Okay, so they're going to see it. It's going to be signed with a certain speed, and it will be really uncomfortable if they go over it above those speeds. And our stock standard setup would have 3.6 ramp, and then either a 1.5 or a 1.2, and it's going to either be 100 mil is high as a pretty sort of stock standard one. And then I'm going to talk to this graph shortly because it's pretty useful one. Okay, but let's go to our very stock standard raised crossing dimensions. Quick prize for the person who can tell me what grade is that? 1 in X. What is that X? 1 in, look at them go. People are ready for that. Okay. Well done. 1 in 12. Yeah. It goes up 1 to 12 length. All right. 1 in 12. Okay. So there we go. One other thing, and I'll come back to this with a sort of particular case study that I've just had a look at. If you've got a longitudinal grade on your road, and that is going to impact on the ramp grade, because you've got to think about that from flat, if that makes sense. And I hope this diagram, over-exaggerated, sort of helps you visualize that. You're also going to have to think about, well, what are the real heights and level differences? I'll come back to that. Okay, so what we've got here is a diagram that you can use because it talks about peak vertical acceleration of vehicles going over a platform at different speeds and for different grades, ramp grades, okay? So if we take that 1 in 12, right, that's the blue line there. And what we know is that vehicles will take our advice in terms of advisory speeds, but people who are using the road often are going to get a feel for it themselves by going over it. Okay, and they'll find what they decide is the appropriate speed. And the appropriate speed for drivers sits in this green here. Okay, they're not going to go up into damaging their vehicle. They might do that once, but they'll learn. If it's down here, they'll just go faster. So when we do that, then we sort of sit in that 20-ish, a little bit above, in that 1 in 12. Okay, that's the the sum speed reduction. If we go up to a 1 in 16 ramp grade, then we're seeing a little, around the 30 kilometre per hour is where it'll start to sit. So you can use this. They've got even some, some other ones in here, 1 in 25 there. There for raised safety platforms at, larger signalised intersections and the like. But I thought, just for the continuity of that. Now, in terms of ramp grades, we've got a whole lot of information out there. We've got Austrode stuff, we've got Australian standards, we've got jurisdictional supplements, and everybody, weighing in on it and having their say and thinking about different road users and everything like that. So what I've done is a bit of the hard work for you. I've collected that information. I've put it all into these slides. I'm not going to go through every point of this because I want you to just understand the principles that we're trying to achieve here. Okay, so you've got TMR stuff, you've got Waka Kotahi, NZPA stuff. But let's have a look at the ideas we've got here. So some jurisdictions will go up to a 150 mil height ramp. I mean, that, platform. This is very high. And down to a 50. And so that's a very interesting one as well. So the idea being that, okay, well, we could extend the length of our ramp, and that's going to change the grade. We could have higher ramps that are quite sharp, and we've got very sharp grades there. It could be longer. We could have shallow or low height, and they could extend out. 75 is also one that's used a bit for bus routes in some jurisdictions. I'll talk to buses in a lot of detail shortly. Okay, so that's sort of what we've got there. The worry we have, or the thing you need to consider is, well, we talked about getting speed reductions, okay? And you can get really great speed reductions with these really high, really harsh ramps, okay? People will go very, very, very slow. But there are actual physical limitations to some vehicles being able to get over them. So we just take a standard car. We've got, first of all, the nose of the vehicle scraping. Then we've got the undercarriage of the vehicle scraping as a possibility. We've got the back of the vehicle scraping as it goes up. That's a possibility. You've got a really long boot area. Okay, and then the tail of it scraping there. You also have the nose scraping as it comes down. All possible issues. Okay. Now, you want to see your raised crossing be derailed very quickly or have to be removed. I mean, if a standard vehicle really can't get over it, it's done. It's doomed. Okay. There are some specific vehicle regulations, though. So, some vehicle, there has to have some clearance, and you can see here that 100 mil off any point within 1 meter of the axle is your minimum ground clearance. So that's an important characteristic to think about. And buses are a really interesting and important one as we think about raised crossings. And there's lots of different buses. Many to think about: articulated buses, shorter wheelbase, and longer wheelbase. But let's think about, generally in Australia and New Zealand, these are sort of our general minimums on buses. 100 mil high off that centre point X, or 6% off X there. Okay, so then you've got the length on the front there, and then you've got a length on the back there. Okay, so actually here are some standard lengths of buses which I put into your notes as well, which have higher clearances. The commercial buses, or sorry, the commuter buses, public transport style buses usually have a higher clearance, which is a good thing. For us, we have some of those coaches and others that are a bit lower, and then when they're fully packed with people and goods and everything like that, they can sit down. So I do want you to think about that. So if you have a large bus comes in and it's down at 100 mil, it literally will not be able to get over that 150, right? It's just going to scrape. Now, it's going to be rare that you get a bus this low, but that's something to think about. Might get up there and then it'll be straddled over this whole thing. Okay, so you do need to know a bit about your buses, and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, if you're in Australia, gives some pretty good information about buses, so you can download that and have a look at what you're dealing with. And you can see here the coach style buses on some routes. You do want to ensure that whatever raised crossing you've got can accommodate this type of vehicle. Because again, we are going to see these going into different areas to pick up people and the like. And again, if they are scraping or getting stuck or the like, we're going to have some serious issues with our rollout of the raised crossings programs. So let's actually have a look at this. This is 1 in 15 ramp grade on this one. And that all works quite nicely at 100 mil high and works really well, really adequately. The coach goes over it, goes slowly over it. It's not generally recommended for the absolute high frequency bus routes, but certainly in your other areas, absolutely adequate and works well. So this one is more that 75, the 1 in 20 ramp grade, which is more the expected if you have your commuter style buses on it. But what you're doing there is you're bringing up the speed of the other vehicles, because they will be able to go through there and navigate that faster. So you've got to keep those things in mind as well. Another little thing I do also point out occasionally is that you can extend your platform lengths. And this was down doing some work for Surf Coast Skidman raised platform to get the whole bus onto the platform, which can give you some advantages in some situations, but we'll come back to that. So this one's an interesting one, 75 mil high, a 1 in 27 ramp grade. And that's going to sort of give people that at least 55 kilometre per hour under our estimations of what people will find a comfortable speed to navigate that. And that's very high, okay, for an area where there's almost no point in having a raised crossing here. You'll operate just like a normal crossing. You're probably getting more value out of the fact it's a different colour here than you are as any raised or the optical illusion that it's raised for a start, but then people will get very used to it. So just have a think about that. But this one is an option, because our aim is to slow vehicles down at these conflict points. And we can do this with other features. This is not preferable, but it is certainly an option. The reason it's not preferable is that we don't raise up the crossing point for people for more accessibility, as Bridget really was very strong on. So we've lost a bit there. We also have to do them on the approach here and the approach there, and you do both sides, because if you don't, vehicles go around it, which is always But from that perspective of lowering people's speeds on the approach here, it actually works quite well. So I'd say this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. And this is used quite a bit. Here's one from Bridget up here. You can see this one. They've tried to do a divider to stop people going around. I would like to see that extended a bit, but that's, the principles are good.
We've just got a couple of questions, Ken, or just comments really. Drew has said, in our experience, AC ramps like those shown don't give the vertical acceleration. It is too smooth. So that was in relation to that very flat kind of crossing, the 75mm high one. So just more same story really, that it's not effective enough. And Hugo's made a comment that motorcycles may not be slowed in these situations.
Yeah, I think they're good points. They're very good points. I mean, cyclists can not be disrupted from their cycling on these as well. But yeah, motorcyclists won't. But motorcyclists versus pedestrian crossing is almost non-existent in terms of crash types, but it has occurred. But yeah, it's not vehicle.
With the length of the bumps, should we make it it run along the entire width of the carriageway? That's a great question.
Yeah, you can just do a normal speed hump on the approach. That's fine. The reason I am often drawn to cushions like this is because buses can straddle it, and I'll show that very shortly. Here's some asphalt ones, which I like because people often complain about the rubber spike down style ones being maintenance challenges after a while. These ones are cutting and asphalted in and work really well. So here's some of those dimensions with buses. 75mm high cushion, I think 1.6 meters wide, in order for that bus to be able to navigate it, and vehicles will slow down. So they're pretty neat device if you haven't used them, and they can be extremely helpful for you in some situations where you might go, I can't do a race crossing. Like, as much as I want to, I can't. And it could be drainage, just absolutely, you just can't do it. It could be the grade of your road. It could be, just an absolutely, like bus group that won't budge on this for some reason or another, or politically, or one reason or another. You are still getting your speed reduction out of this. It's not as good as we want, but it's pretty good.
Got one more question here, Ken, about, do you need to lower the curb heights to achieve 75 or 100mm height on the road?
You can sort of transition it in. I'll go back. I don't know whether that one I had there. You can sort of see it sort of transitions in with some different curves there and the like. So yeah, there's a bit to be done there. So the other thing that's important to remember, and I'll use this in an example I'll give shortly, is you don't need to have the same entry and exit ramp grade. Now, kind of important that you have a separator to do that. But you can see here we've got exit ramp, shallower, and we've got entry ramp. I mean, all we care about is the entry ramp grade, slowing the vehicles on the approach and at that point. You can transition it back in as long as far as you want. That's not like, it doesn't really matter in that sense. So if I just have a look at this little case study here, and we've got a very challenging site here. So we've got 8% grade coming down there, and you can see there that trying to get some sort of raised shared path crossing, and thinking then about here we've got, well, can we just make the shared path run along the same grade there as the road or the like? Well, you don't want to do that, because you don't want to make it too steep, because people in wheelchairs or mobility devices, and it's on that angle, right? So 2.5 is sort of where people tend to land based on some Australian standards. Actually goes to 3.3. So you could make that go to 3.3. That's in Austroads for 4A. But you can go to 3.3 if it's an asphalt surface. So have a look at that. That helps out a little bit in terms of us navigating a bus over this. But even at 3.3, it's still fairly conservative. And, I'm a big one for ensuring we provide these facilities that are, accessible for everybody. But if the choice is between not being able to do a raised crossing or going slightly more than a 3.3, I'll go more than 3.3. And I'll justify that by the one safety benefits. The fact that even our 3.3 is considering a large spectrum of accessibility needs, and that you're not making it completely inaccessible. It's a tiny little bit off the end. I wouldn't, I don't do that as run-of-the-mill practice, but in that consideration, that's sort of your design exception report if you need to go down that track. So, just to get everybody on the same page as what the issue here, some of you are very clear on what the issue is here. We've got a bus coming down. We're trying to keep this at a fairly flat bit so people in wheelchairs and the like can get it. And that bus is going to nose itself out there. It might, or if it doesn't nose itself out there, it'll get up there and then it'll get stuck on there. And so our options become, flatten that out a little bit more, 3.3, may nudge a little bit more than that. Extend your ramp length out, okay? And you can extend that considerably. You could even sort of go up, extend for some, running parallel with the road width and run it down. And you're extending the whole length of this out. And when you've got that, then you should be able to get your bus to come in, not nose out. We go over and navigate out. And it should be able to come out as well in that sense. So for this example, I'd be exploring the possibility of certainly going to 3.3 on that and flattening it out. So you can see there where the you'd almost just run it out and paper it out. You don't care what the departure side is doing. You've got a lovely separator there, and you could extend this potentially out, and again you could paper it however you want on that side. So you've got some really good options there how to do it. To a degree, I don't really care about this point that much, because the vehicles turning in are going to have their speed significantly dampened by the fact that they've had to turn. Right? I don't think this is a crossroad, but vehicles aren't going to be approaching this. If this was mid-block and there was approach speeds, that would be a different story. But this one really doesn't concern me in terms of that. So what we could also do, if this scenario proved that with all of those adjustments, we still couldn't quite do it, well, you could look to be just flattening out your crossing to a grade that you're acceptable for that crossing point, utilizing a speed cushion at that point, which is the only real point we want vehicles to, we're going to need vehicles to slow down. As I say, the vehicles coming in here should be fine. The vehicles coming in here should be fine because they'll be slower. You may want to do a little something here, but that I wouldn't necessarily put a speed cushion there, just because the fact that vehicles are turning and it's not giving us that parallel crossing. But a bus coming through here will just be able to straddle that. They'll have vehicles slow down on the approach to that. So that's another option. I wouldn't say that's my preferred one. My preferred one would be that if it can work, and if you can keep it to that 3.3 in terms of that point there. So hopefully that's helped a bit there. Happy to chat to those that are working on that one if they've still got questions.
Okay, and we've got a question here. Do we get the same speed reduction with softer riding vehicles like SUVs and four-wheel drive utes?
No. You don't. And the variety of vehicles on the network is huge. So although those graphs do take into account quite a variety of vehicles, they're based on real world accelerometer tests. So they probably do take into account some of that. But yes, you're going to see some sort of bell curve, and you're going to see extreme, that we have the four-wheel drives that have the ability to sort of, with their big suspension, just move over them. And that's part of the nature of, we were dealing with sort of these varied vehicles, and they'll approach them at varied speeds. But yeah, it's a good point. Okay, lighting. Now, I'm not going to be able to go into lighting into a huge amount of detail, but I just want to give you again the principles of it. And the Australian standard, Australian and New Zealand standard, I should say. So 1158.4 is the one you'd be looking at, Part 4 there, lighting and pedestrian crossings. And we've got this general idea that we're going to want to light from those two directions, is what we're looking to do. They use a 3-meter setback there as your sort of area to illuminate the pedestrians on the approach. So we've used the 1.6 in our sightline calculation. It gives it a little bit of extra there when we're thinking about that. But the basic principles of lighting of raised crossing is that you create these vertical and horizontal planes which should be lit. And so we see there that we've got, each of these points is somewhere where we would be checking the lux. Okay, so there's quite a few sort of points that you would be checking. So that's how you would do a proper lighting assessment. Now, in terms of setbacks, well, this is where on these shared path facilities you could use those values that we calculated earlier in this session. Sorry, you don't need to worry about that one. Why did I do that? I'm going to cross that out again. That's the one you are most interested in. Why? Because the cyclist approaching, we're not, it's going to be harder to see. They may not have a light. We hope they have a light, but they may not. The vehicles will have lights. The overwhelming majority have lights, and they have them on so that the cyclist will be able to see, but we really need to make sure that driver can see that cyclist. So TMR's one sets it back 10 meters as a particular point. I mean, I would like to do a bit of that calculation and work things out, but that's something that they've put down there. So I suppose that's about as much as I was going to go into on lighting. I know there's quite a bit of interest in lighting. I might just go back. So what you use in terms of which lighting levels is really unclear and like so. V3 is very bright for crossings, and I feel it's overkill. The other thing is that lighting is expensive, and a number of councils are now using solar lighting. And I really like the solar lighting movement that's happening for raised crossings, and the reason for that is, it is much cheaper. So anybody who's interested in that, City of Greater Geelong have been rolling out solar lighting on their raised pedestrian crossings now for a while, and they are getting wonderful performance out of everything, and it's meeting all of their requirements. It's environmentally more friendly, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper to install. So yeah, that's now, if you do have really specific lighting questions, it's not actually my area of absolute expertise, so I may have to take some of them on notice. But we do have questions.
There's a couple of questions here about the zebra crossing lighting triggering a higher standard of lux in accordance with Australian standards. Glare could be an issue in this scenario at side street crossings. Any any suggestions. And Craig has mentioned that in Queensland, the lighting standard for a wombat is much higher than for a raised priority crossing. Pedestrians and cyclists have priority in both situations. This is causing the cost of wombats to be significantly higher. I'll just give a little bit of background in terms of the Queensland guideline. I think the mid-block crossing lighting standards are similar or the same as the Australian standard for a mid-block crossing, but when we developed that guidance around side road crossings, the lighting engineer who was developing the guidance took into consideration that these crossings will be provided in a low speed environment where vehicle speeds are already tightly controlled with a raised platform and often with the geometry as well. So that's why the lighting requirements are not as high on the raised crossings. I assume that when they were developing the Australian standard for lighting, that's been developed for an upgrade crossing, where, as Ken talked about before, you need a greater approach sight distance and the needs are a lot higher because you've got higher vehicle speeds, you don't have any speed control and opening up that reaction time and things. So Craig's questions about how do we get the same lighting standard applied to both facilities I don't think I can answer that in terms of getting it through the Australian standard, but I think taking into consideration the raised platform, that's what's been achieved with the raised crossing guideline.
It's raised really good points here, and we don't want to go overkill on this because the cost just blows out, and we'll just see so many areas that should have raised crossings not get them because it's unaffordable. I did take a note on that. I think we should maybe get together and put out a bit of an industry note on that, because the principles, you're spot on there. We're using principles that kind of aren't appropriate in all situations, which is at the detriment of us getting really good crossing facilities in. Speaking of expensive things, drainage can be extremely expensive as well. But we need to really consider drainage because we are placing something raised in the roadway. It's going to have implications on drainage. And there's lots and lots of thinking to be done around this. I suppose the easiest way for me to do it is to jump in and sort of give you 6 different options. It's really 5 options. I just put a 6th one in because I looked at it, scratched my head and thought this is pretty ridiculous. So the options are, and the ridiculous one is to keep the curve and channel and the like. And why is that ridiculous? Well, I mean, it's ridiculous because it's not accessible for anybody. Well, it is accessible for some people, but it doesn't meet accessibility requirements. It's going to have some obvious challenges. So don't recommend that one. The low ramp height one, so using lower ramps to get your water over. Positioning at a high point. Now this one I think is good if you can. If you're able to position, the crossing at a high point and the waters can flow, you're not going to have your drainage. That can be very hard in brownfield sites, obviously, because your pedestrian desire line really is dictating where you're going to be putting the crossing. Greenfield sites, it would be easier if that's a major consideration in your greenfield site, which I highly doubt it would be, but there's something there to think about. Okay. Curb ramp down and up again, like you can see here, is an option. And you see there the curb outstand, the curb build out, playing an important role there in that transition point, so vehicles sort of don't sneak around it, drop a tire into the lower part to go over faster and those sorts of things. Box drains of different configurations is an option. And then the pit and pipe scenario there, so get the water in. So let's just have a look at those and some of the advantages and disadvantages in our last little bit here. So yeah, the idea of pit and pipe and making more capacity in your pipe network there for the water is very good. It's great. It alleviates a lot of the issues that we will talk about shortly. It's just super expensive, isn't it? But it's very good in effect. The idea of different box sort of drains or mini sort of culverty things is quite attractive, and it provides you with the ability for your water to flow under. It's a lower cost. You provide that sort of consistent surface for people in wheelchairs, mobility scooters, or the like to get across. So that is really something you should be considering. I think it's a decent option. And you can see a couple of examples of it here. It seems to work quite well. But it does require you to ensure that, you're monitoring it for leaf litter and it getting blocked and the like. So there's that bit of extra work required on it. So here's one that was blocked fairly quickly after installation, after some different events. And yeah, it's something that you need to factor in and consider. So again, when we're sort of using the pit and pipe scenario, you can do some different, pretty awesome use of different areas. I like this one, which was sort of has an element of water sensitive urban design. It could be extended more, where you have this sort of inlet here, and then it goes into almost a little mini basin, and then it's got some plants and the like, and then it goes down from there. So something to consider. There's another picture of it. Now this one, which people will often say, people often don't like this due to the fact that we've got having to go down and back up. And for me, it's a bit of case by case on this. This particular one, I think, is quite good because it's got fairly shallow, it's fairly shallow in here, and then it's got some space to go up. And again, these ones quite good. These ones not so much, just due to the fact that we've got quite a steep down and quite a steep up. And this is where we start to get into trouble and challenges with our people with mobility devices and the like being able to navigate over this. This one's an interesting one, again, in terms of, well, it's obviously been cheaper to get this in. You kept the curb and channel there, and in it goes. It did, watching this lady with her mobility device try to navigate over, it just took quite a while to navigate over it. Now, I'm really torn here, because if I can get in 20 crossings, to one, if I go pit and pipe, which is probably an exaggeration, but 10 to 1 or 5 to 1, as long as they're reasonable in terms of these down and upgrades, I'm happy to do it. I just want to see more raised crossing. We get so much value out of it. But if we can do the methods to make it level and flat, that's what we opt for. Any comments there, Prue?
Yes.
I don't have long to go.
Okay. Any advice on roads that are critical secondary flow paths? Is speed cushions the only practical option? I was going to say speed cushions and the low platforms. I know the Goonawarra Drive ones are a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. So, yeah, you may end up in that speed cushion scenario if you absolutely have to. Okay. Signs and lines, I don't need to spend too long on because I think this diagram out of 1742, 10 for Australians is very good, and it shows everything that the Australian standard says should be done. Okay, and it's got some notes with it. So where I have some issues is the number of signs you need. It's crazy. Advanced warning of the regulatory sign, potentially advanced of the raising if you want. The raised and advisory speed. Then you've got your crossing on on both sides of the sign, there and there. No stopping, and advanced there. So there's a fair bit to it. You can see there that we do see slightly different configurations all over the place of how exactly people do it. Got to make sure you keep your height up there so it's not blocking, or people don't hit their head on it, is more the 2 meter one. And, interesting here, some people get angry at this, that, 2 regulatory signs on the one pole. I've never been fussed about this sort of stuff in this environment. It's slow speed, and it's doing its job. But anyway, we are pushing to try to see if we can consolidate some of these. We've got some concepts out there which people are looking at. Hopefully, we can just lessen the number of signs required in different scenarios. For New Zealand, I think the next slide I show you where that is. Again, it's fairly well documented in the different guidelines what Kotahi puts out, and we've got the line marking being the piano key in New Zealand using the little triangle things, and you've got your optional diamond on the approach. And there's this sort of New Zealand look and feel, and this one being a multi a cyclist crossing as well, so having those extra signage. So there's the reference, and I'll show you. You'll be able to get all the PDF of all my notes or the slides here, so you'll be able to jump into any of this for the detail. So yeah, this is, we pretty much, I think the Australian Standard Committee, what is it, MS42 or whatever, are looking at getting this into the Australian Standard setup. But at the moment, everybody seems to use the Queensland reference there on the give way to pedestrians and cyclists is what you put as your supplementary on that shared path crossing. And yeah, a few more little references there. And yeah, I don't need to go into this in detail. There's a setup. If you've got that shared path crossing, sorry, you've got the bike lane and you've got the wombat crossing as a combination. You can see that sort of this one's going extreme with the amount of signs. They're all on the one post. I'll let you decide whether you like that or not. I think the fact that you have to put that many signs is a bit crazy, and I think technically they should have had some different staggers on those. And just really only one point I want to make out of the pavement is it's much easier to get those sharp, clean lines using concrete. It's a bit longer to install, but you're able to get it's easier to get those sharp changes. You dig out there, and that gives you then that you don't want to just drop it on top. Obviously, that'll start to chip off. But you do that for both an asphalt or a concrete. And you can see there concrete ones where it's a very nice that they've been able to get the clean lines there. It can be a bit harder with the asphalt and the roller and the like. All right. I did
That's
race through a little bit at the end there. I'm going to show you where the copy of the PDFs are if you want to refer to any of those. And of course, my contact details there. Happy to chat with you further about different bits and pieces if you like. We'll put you in contact with people. But I do need to shortly show everybody how to finish off this course. But Prue, I'll answer any questions as I change over to the learning management system.
Okay, so is it okay to use two different types of drainage treatments for stormwater on each side of the raised priority crossing? Yep. Sounds good to me. Need a sign to say signs ahead. I think people are getting a bit cheeky. Triangle things are called shark's teeth. So there we go.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Shark's
next
teeth,
time
my bad. I did know that.
There's a few. Do the bigger, orange backing on the give way signs. I assume there's some kind of warrants for when to put the orange backing on the give way signs. Do you, I can't remember.
I'll have to have a look. I'll try and put this into the learning management system. I have a fact sheet on escalation of warning signs. Ooh. And it basically goes, like, what is our escalation from warning sign to more, and it applies likewise to regulatory signs as well. So
okay, great.
I'll put that into the learning management system.
Awesome.
Got to note that.
Okay, I think that's it. Hang on, my chat's jumped around now. So
all right, well, let me show the how to finish off the course, and then you can monitor the chat while I do that. Okay, so everybody hopefully has access to the learning management system. We really need you to get access to finish this course. So if you haven't got that email from Safe System Solutions, which gives you access to this, you need to get in contact with Kathy or whoever's emailed you about this course. However you got the link to this course, you need to get in contact with that person to get access to this learning management system. Okay, because in here you've got your introductions and the like. You've got some course info, but resources I talked about, resources here. And then I've got this road design and engineering one. There's some good other stuff. There's podcasts and other links and some other resources that others gave us. But in here, you can see lots of the different documents that I referred to. So you've got those and you'll be able to look at them. And I'll, as said there, I might pop another couple of things in there as we go. You've got then, of course, everybody's presentation as a PDF that you can use there, and other things that they might have put in there for you. And the last thing you're going to need to do is here. You're going to need to go and provide feedback on the course. Okay, it's very short. We just want to know what your thoughts are. What did you like? What could improve? Give some info there. And then once you've done this, your certificate will release. So then you can download your certificate. But I should have said, we are going to do one little thing to ensure that you got something out of this. You have a quiz in my module to do. It's short. It's like 10 questions or 11 questions or something. You have a go at the quiz. It's easy, from Bridget's stuff, and then a little bit of other stuff, a little bit of engineering, design stuff. Oh, it's only 8 questions. So do that, and then you'll be able to do the feedback form and get your certificate. So we've only got 2 minutes left. I want to say thank you to Prue for her wonderful facilitation and her presentations. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedule to come along to this. I hope you got a few ideas out of it. You made some connections out of it as well that you'll be able to talk to about other stuff. But let me know if there is anything else I need to cover in our last minute.
Brian wants to sit in the pub and have a chat about raised priority crossings into the wee hours, and I think it'd be a good idea to put the raised crossings outside the pub as well. I always recommend where you've got those kind of users. And Gemma's last minute is any tips on convincing people that the world's not going to end if you put the raised crossings in at roundabouts. So I can pass on videos. They work brilliantly in my local community. But if you've got any comments on that, Ken.
Well, as some of you know who follow Safe System Solutions on LinkedIn, we do these safe system snippets. I've done multiple snippets on race crossings at roundabouts. I will do more. I'm writing a note on that too. We'll keep doing it. I think examples are always good, aren't they? Aren't they, Prue? Like people
Yeah.
seeing others have done it in lots of situations, just you know, more and more pictures of it. It becomes commonplace, and we can, you know, convince people or get people to say, oh, it does seem to be the dumb thing.
I've got a couple of those videos that I used in my presentation of 2 roundabouts that have very similar traffic volumes, and one has raised crossings on it. The one without raised crossings feels like it's got much higher traffic volumes, but they're actually quite similar. So maybe I can load those up and then there'll be something you can refer to.
Yeah.
There was a comment about cost of concrete versus asphalt. My understanding is concrete's a lot more costly and a lot associated with traffic control.
Yeah, you have to build it in, as I understand. Yeah, I haven't actually seen them constructed in detail, but in sort of segments and half the road at a time. And it's more expensive. I think we've picked on time. So
Yes.
thanks everybody. Keep in contact, and yeah, good luck with your race crossings.
Thanks, everyone.